Welcome everyone and welcome to this week's F1 Fixed Setup Track Guide. We are at the Red Bull Ring this week and it's a short one this time around. The Red Bull Ring, these cars go around here in just over a minute long. The lap time I set here this week was a 1:04.6. We are, as always, in the race fixed setup, so that means we've got a full tank of fuel. We are limited to the balanced deployment mode. No quali or attack mode available. They of course make a big difference to your lap times, but these track guides are all about improving your consistency over a race distance, how to control this car in a race trim, because that's what it's all about. That's how we gain our I rating and that's how we gain our safety rating, as well as always trying to make you faster as well, because that's what we're all here to do. But yeah, this track, it's quick, but it's also tricky as well. There's a couple of corners here where your tyres are very susceptible to locking up. That's going to play, of course, a big part in degradation. We are running a soft tyre here this week. As previous weeks, it should be more than enough to get you through a fixed race where they are shorter than the Open Series. The Open Setup Series, once again, will probably be a medium tyre. Not sure we're going to see track temperatures that require the hard tyre this season at all, but who knows. Track temperatures, 23 degrees is the time that I set it in. That's the temperatures and the conditions that iRacing schedule chucked out. That's how it was generated. I did do another session after this and it chucked out a high 28, 29 degree track temperature, so that will obviously have an impact on tyre deg. The soft tyres will probably degrade a bit quicker, so just have a quick check of that track temperature before you start the race, guys, just to see whether or not if you want to take the risk of running a soft tyre or just be extra cautious and run the medium tyre, which, you know, barring any spins and any lockups, will definitely last to the end of the race. But as always, we are going to have a look at our lap in cockpit view from a far chase camera angle and then analyse that lap and see how we did it. So yeah, lo and behold, guys, let's head into it. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and enjoy. So guys, let's see how we put that lap together. Now it's a short lap this week, just over 1 minute long. These cars are phenomenally fast round the Red Bull Ring. And first and foremost, we're going to check the two numbers that you should always check on the dash when I'm doing these track guides. So I always start with as much battery as possible. So we've just come out of the last corner, so the battery mode is starting to deploy. I started at 100%. And then our brake bias, which is set at 51.5. Now that is my preference. That's quite low for this week, but that's because Red Bull Ring has a couple of corners around here where you're very susceptible to lockups, in particularly the front right. So I found that 51.5 limited those lockups, even though you still have to be very careful. Now, if you guys don't know how to get it below 54, as described in previous videos, it is very easy to do. It's all to do with the brake fine adjustment. I will link a description to a video of how to do that below in the description, so you can check that out. It's a nice 2-minute video that's easy to do. But we're going to move on with the track guide itself. So as you come out of the last corner, you need to be aware of the DRS zone here. Now there are 3 DRS zones at Red Bull Ring, one down the main straight, one out of the first corner and leading up to turn 3, and then straight after turn 3 heading down into turn 4. So there's while it's a short lap, 3 DRS zones to make use of. So very important to get these next couple of corners right to set up those overtaking opportunities. So you can see as we get over that line, 4 lights on the dash indicate that we've got our DRS deployed and open. And then we're going to hang it out to the left hand side here, move the car over to the middle of the red and white curb. Now as you can see, we've got the 100 board marker, 50 up ahead of us. We don't want to move, we want to make sure that we're not too far over. If your right wheels are on the inside of the white line, which is just hidden behind the halo at the moment, you will get off track. And what we keep an eye out for is the 100 board marker, and we want to be braking just as we hit that 100 board marker. So not before it, just as it kind of goes out of your vision, just as you hit it. That's when we can start braking. You can see there, we've got our wheels just really kind of on the white line, which indicates the track limits. And then we're shifting down here into 4th gear, turning in once we see the apex. And if you want a visual reference, kind of just after you get after the 50 marker, you can see my steering input, I start to turn in. And then we trail brake a little bit through here just to control the nose of the car, get it pointing in. And then as we hit that apex, because we want to get it as tight to this yellow sausage curb here. I know it doesn't really look like a sausage curb, but it kind of is. If you hit this and you cut the corner too much, for one, it's a 1X, and 2, this really unsettles the car, and you're just going to affect your whole drive down into turn 3, where there's a DRS zone. You'll be a sitting duck, or you'll lose that overtaking opportunity. So the first corner, guys, just before we head onto the exit, is it really an overtaking opportunity? Only unless you get a very good run on the car in front. It's not a corner really that is worth lunging it up the inside, because if you can concentrate on trying to nail your exit, keep it close to them, you've got a nice easy overtake up into turn 3 where you've got DRS, you've got the draft, and that's a much safer place to make the overtake stick. Because if you throw it up the inside here, the other guy is going to have your draft and more than likely have a overtaking opportunity to just retake the place back, which is a bit it's just counterintuitive. So as you can see, as we hit the apex, keeping our wheels as close to that yellow sausage curb as we can on the inside, we're on the throttle in 4th gear. This limits the revs. We don't want to be any lower than this. 4th gear is the lowest. Did try going through here in 5th gear, but there just wasn't enough turning in this setup, so 4th gear was the one to go through. And then on the throttle, pushing the limits here, a lot, guys. You can see my left wheels are kind of on the outside of this big yellow sausage curb. Any further to the left, I would have got a 1X. So especially when you're doing your qualifying laps, be careful. And just overall, this track, as I said at the start, it is very, very, I wouldn't say harsh, but it's a track that invites a lot of off tracks, because it's very easy just to carry too much speed, even in these cars when you've got so much downforce. And over a course of a race, we've only got 17 X's, and it is very possible to get just 17 1X's around this track very easily. So be careful to try and, while we want to be on the limit, we want to rein it in just a little bit so that we're not going to get a disqualification or a penalty of a drive through, because it would just ruin your race. But you can see here, there is enough grip on that sausage curb on full throttle, and then very quickly you can see the DRS. We've got our second DRS zone, and then we're just going to play this all the way to the end. This is nice and easy. We're covering as little track as possible, working our way up through the gears while we've got DRS open. Battery is deploying as we speak as well, up into 8th gear, and then we come up to turn 3, which is the very tight uphill right-hander. Now this corner is going to catch everyone out. Anyone who's raced Red Bull around here in any series, this is where 95%, I would say, of the crashes happen. The other 5% happen at the next corner or the last corner. The first corner, generally speaking, because there's a bit of a bailout, there's not many crashes that happen, but this one in particular is where most people crash. So this is really important to keep an eye out for, guys. Now we're keeping an eye out for the 100 ball marker. As you can see, I'm starting to brake just before we approach it. Now if you're in the open setup, guys, I have tried one of the open setups that are available from Craig's. You can brake later. You can brake on the 100 ball marker in this fixed setup. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it. No matter what brake bias I had, the setup just does not allow for the car to brake on that 100 ball marker. You just lock up. So to ensure we're not locking up that front right and we run out of track or spin the car under braking, we want to be braking just before the 100 in a straight line, as you can see, up towards the 50. We've got the middle of the car, the halo's over the middle of the red and white curb here. Be careful not to go too far over, as per the previous corner. If you get your wheels on the inside of this white line here, it will result in a 1X. If you guys as well want to check out what the off-tracks are, you can see that iRacing do implement their new off-track system around here. You can have a read through these and just see exactly where the off-track limits are, which is good. And then we're braking down all the way into 3rd gear here. Now you can take this in 2nd as well. It's personally down to preference. I found I had more control with going through in 3rd gear than I did in 2nd. The only time I really found I needed to go into 2nd was when I felt like I was on the limit of locking up, because it's very easy to just lock this front right so often through here. For the course of a fixed race where it's shorter than an open series, you can get away with locking up the front right here maybe a couple of times, but over the course of an open setup series, it's really essential that you try and not lock up here at all, because you'll just lose so much grip throughout the course of the race, especially towards the end. So we're trail braking here, guys, in 3rd gear. And then as we reach the end of the curve, that's when we start to turn in, although you should be looking into the apex, as I always say. And very, very similar, guys, to how it was in the last corner, which was the 1st corner. We want to keep our wheels as close to this sausage curve as we can without actually hitting it. If you cut this, for one, it's an off track. 2, I would say 99% of the time, if you go over this and then as soon as you get your foot down on the exit, because you're on an uphill slope and the car is unsettled, As soon as you get on the throttle, the rear just spins on you, and that is in pretty much any car, let alone these F1 cars. So be careful to stay off of that sausage curb if you can. If you're taking avoiding action from a crash, because inevitably throughout the week you will see one here, just be very careful that you ease on the throttle when you get round the corner. But you can see we're trail braking into the corner. We clipped it ever so slightly. I actually didn't realise that I clipped it. And you can see it's unsettled the car, and then I'm getting on the throttle ever so easily as I'm unwinding the steering wheel. Don't stamp your foot on the throttle, because if you stamp your foot on the throttle while you've got that much steering lock, you're gonna spin the car. So be careful, guys. Patience is key in this corner. And then unwind the steering wheel, and then actually once you get the steering wheel straight, you can, I found, get on the throttle quite early actually, or earlier than is to be expected, because there is quite a lot of traction out of this uphill corner once you've got the car straight here. I did have a little bit of wheel spin there, as you can see, fighting the back end, and then we're now approaching the next DRS zone. Now guys, this sausage curb on the left hand side, if you do run onto it, be very careful, because it is very susceptible to spinning your car. There's not really a lot of grip here. You need to get your left wheels over this sausage curb, so over to the left hand side, to ensure that you can get on the throttle as you normally would. If your wheels are on the inside of that curb, you need to be careful, because if you get your foot down too early, the car is just going to spin on you. And that's speaking from experience, and that's just, once again, in any car, that's the case for this sausage curb. But moving on, heading down now into the next DRS zone. As you see there, we've just gone through it, and our lights indicate that we've got DRS deployed, running down into the next corner, downhill, and then this corner is, once again, very susceptible to lockups, because if you've got DRS open, you're in someone's draft, very easy to overshoot this. Now, we are braking just before the 100. That's what we're looking for. We're over to the left-hand side once again, because it's a downhill right-hander. This is the corner where you've seen Hamilton have a crash with Albon. You've seen Norris and Perez. All too often, the inside car here, because it's an off-camber corner and downhill, the car on the inside just puts the power down, and the car on the outside just gets crowded out. Now, it's not the guy on the outside's fault. You should be entitled and allowed to overtake around the outside of this corner. But my advice on this corner, guys, is if you are going side by side with someone, just give plenty of space, whether you're on the inside or the outside, because it's just a treacherous corner. And as I said, it's very susceptible to lockups as well. You'll see probably a lot more crashes here than you normally would in other series, just for that reason. So, braking just before we get to the 100. This is where the brake bias really comes into its own here, because if you have the brake bias too far forward, you will just lock up those fronts. Braking down towards the 50 in a straight line, and then as we approach the end of the curb, shift down into third, and then we start to turn in. And it's important here, guys, to lift off of the brake. Now, we can't trail brake round this actual corner. What we're doing is we're trail braking just to get the car to start turning in, and then we lift off, because if you hold your brake here or a little bit further, you're going to lock your front tyres, and then the car is you're just going to understeer. The car's going to go straight on, and you're going to lose tyre performance. So practice braking in that straight line. As soon as you get to the end of the curb, as soon as you really start to turn in, that's when you want to get off of the brake. Allow the momentum of the car to turn round, and you can see I'm starting to just hover over the throttle, keeping it as close to this curb as we can without actually touching it, because it does unsettle the car. Even though you won't get a 1x if you do go over this curb, you don't gain any time. We want to stay on the black stuff. It just unsettles the car, and we can't get our foot down on the throttle as early as we would like. And you can see here, I'm now starting to ease on the throttle, but being careful not to be on full throttle until I know I've unwound the steering wheel, I've opened the steering, and then we're very quickly up through the gears. Then moving round over to the right hand side very quickly, keeping an eye out for the 50 ball marker. We've got a nice quick swooping downhill left-hander here, braking just before we approach it. If you brake on it, it's a little bit too late in this setup. There's not enough front end to get the car pointing in, even with trail braking. The only way to do that is you just lose too much momentum, so we want to be braking just before the 50. Down into 5th gear, and you can see here I'm just controlling the nose of the car to get it pointing in, keeping it as tight to the red and white curb as possible. Once again, we don't want to be on it. There is literally no grip on this curb. So if you do go on it throughout the course of a race or in your quali lap, just don't get down on the throttle once you're up on that curb, because the rears will just spin. There's little to no grip on it. And you can see as we get around about halfway round the curb, we're then getting on the throttle. Opening up the steering. We want the car making use of the runoff, making sure, look, you can see there the halo is in the middle of the red and white curb and the red and green rumble strip here. If you go over too far right, you will get an off track, and of course as well, we've got a lot of gravel here, so be careful. We're just running this down straight, and it's a bit difficult to see here, guys, but at the end of this red and white curb and the red and green curb here, it kind of comes into a point, into kind of like a triangle, shall we say. And as you get just past that, let's move it into far chase. There we go. You can see that curb and the AstroTurf, it comes into a point here. As you get just past this, that's when we're then going to lift. We're going to cover the brake ever so slightly, just to get the front nose of the car turning in, and then we're going to be back onto the throttle. It's a very quick corner, very enjoyable corner actually, but really suits the downforce of this car. And you can see starting to turn in, covering the brake just a little bit. It's like a very minimal dab of the brake just to get the nose turning in. And then as we start to approach this red and white curb, you can see I'm getting onto the throttle. We want, like the previous corner, we want to be as close to this as possible without being on it, because there's not a lot of grip. And then as we get halfway round, we get on full throttle. Make use of this rumble strip or this runoff here. Covering as little track as possible, moving over to the left hand side, and then into the last two corners where it's very, very easy to ruin your lap and very easy to cause an unnecessary crash as well. Now, we're going to run it down. We're all the way up into 8th gear here. And then we keep an eye out for the 50 ball marker. And that's our turning point and also our braking point, because we're going to be shifting down from 8th gear here into 6th gear. But we're not going to change down into 6th gear until we get into the apex. So you can see just trail braking to control the nose of the car, and as we get to the apex, we shift down into 6th, and then as we are exiting the apex, we get back onto the throttle, as you can see, making use of all this runoff on the left hand side. It's there for good reason, so you can get all your wheels on the inside of this white curve, this white line, which normally indicates the track limits, and that allows us to open up the last corner, which of course is essential to setting up a possible overtake into the first corner if you've got a good run on someone, and of course for your quali laps as well. You can see here the red and white AstroTurf, shall we say, or paint on the left hand side. As this runs out, that is our turning point. So you can see just as we approach this, that's our braking point and our turning point. And that's what we're looking for. And we shift down into 6th gear now. Shift down into 5th gear. Now I did try going through here in 6th gear, but there's not enough front end on this car to get through here in 6th gear. That's me personally. Some of you guys may prefer it, but I found I had to slow the car down too much to stay within track limits, for one, which we'll talk about in a second, because the last corner is very, very difficult for track limits and can completely ruin your race. 5th gear, while you're quite high in the revs, we're not at the actual rev limiter, and it just pulled the car up enough with the engine braking, as you can see, and I was able to just get that acceleration out of the corner while staying within track limits. So 5th gear, personally, within fixed setup. In the open setups, it's probably going to be different. It will probably be 6th gear, because you'll be able to change the aero and a number of different things to get it through here. But 5th gear, once again, keeping it as tight to this yellow sausage curb as we can. And as we hit the apex, that's when we're on the throttle. And then full throttle, unwinding the steering wheel. And we was very, very close here to getting an off track. Now, just going to move this into far chase. If my left wheels were any further over to the left hand side here, I would have got an off track. Now, the track limits are outside of this AstroTurf, shall we say. So they've been very kind to us, iRacing, in essence of this runoff. And if I was any further over, I would have got an off track. But what they are very harsh on is that I would say 9 times out of 10, if you get a 1x here, it is also accompanied by a slowdown. And it is a very harsh slowdown. It is around, I say it's a harsh slowdown. It's probably a well-deserved slowdown. But the slowdown itself is harsh. It's around 1.5 to 2 seconds, I think it is. Can't remember off the top of my head. But it's enough that you do need to slow down on the straights, and you're going to lose a number of positions and quite a substantial amount of time on the guys in front of you. So yeah, be careful here, guys, that you don't take too much out of the last corner, because it's a painful one to take, especially in your quali laps and throughout the race. Speaking from experience, it's a hard one. It's a hard one to take. In honesty, if you do get that slowdown, you're best off just moving over to the right hand side of the track instantly, slowing down, getting rid of it, and then just carrying on with your race, rather than trying to put off the inevitable, because it's very easy to ignore it, or just try and let it dwindle down, and then before you know it, you've just lost and ruin your race, and possibly ruin other people's races. Thing is, in this car, the closing speed is so quick, you need to be careful. So yeah, just be careful of other people slowing down on this main straight out of the last corner, because they've got to slow down. So then we've got the DRS zone again, and there we are. over the finish line, and that was a 1:04.64. So yeah, nice short lap this week. Not too much really to think about. Just be careful. My main points would be careful of those lockups. It's the soft tyre should be good enough here this week for the fixed races, medium for the longer races, for open setup as it has been for pretty much the previous weeks. But yeah, just be careful of those lockups because it could quite easily ruin that front right, and then you're going to struggle for the rest of the race. If you feel like you're going to struggle with those lockups or just struggle with the degradation towards the end of the race, start with the mediums. That way you're guaranteed, unless you have a spin, you're guaranteed to have a nice amount of grip at the end of the race without the tyres falling off. So yeah, hope that helps you out this week, guys. As always, this is a race setup. This is in full tank of fuel as well. Lap times are only going to get quicker. So yeah, hopefully this helps you out, makes you more consistent, makes you faster, and hopefully you have some good races here this week. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, guys. Turn those notifications on, and see you for the next one. Bye.